Hello and welcome to COS Indiana Live as we bring you Roundtable. The Roundtable segment is presented here every fourth Monday of the month at 7 p.m. We'll be focusing on education and discussion of the topics and challenges we all face as we use the Constitution to save the Constitution. Join us now as we bring you COS Indiana Roundtable with our MC, John Ackerman.
Hi there. Welcome back to COS Indiana Roundtable. I'm your host, John Ackerman. Joining me in a few moments will be a few members of our state leadership team, plus a special guest. They will address the big issues around the idea of self-governance. Now, if you have a comment or a question, you can ask it beginning right now. If you're watching live on Facebook or YouTube, just click the comment button and enter your question. Plus, we have added the capability to take phone calls. At any time during the program, you can call in and join the roundtable with your question or comment. And the number to call is 317-426-8689. We'll leave it up there for a few moments while I bring on our state communications coordinator, Ken Kashuba. Ken's the guy who's going to be answering your call. Hi, Ken.
Hi, John. Thanks.
What can somebody expect when they call in and hear your wonderful voice answering?
Well, first they'll be asked to leave their name, and that will get announced to me. And once I know that there's somebody on the line and their name, I will pick up the phone and basically get them on hold and ready to be brought onto the program.
Okay, and so you're going to let me know when you have somebody to bring on by just showing me your hand, and when I see that hand,
thumbs up.
I'll know that there's a caller waiting, and we'll get to that caller ASAP. Okay, thanks, Ken. Well, viewers, you can also email the roundtable at this email address, raiseyourvoicecos@gmail.com. That's raiseyourvoicecos@gmail.com. So after the conversation around self-governance, to conclude this month's roundtable, we'll invite you to join Convention of States, and we'll show you how to volunteer to help us make a difference. Now, before I bring on all the members of our panel, let me ask you to help us grow the audience by clicking that like and share button on your screen, and by making a comment or asking a question. You see, the Facebook and YouTube algorithms notice viewer responses. They know that something's going on, and then in response to that, they show it to more of their users. So help us grow the audience by making a comment and by clicking those like and share buttons. And now we welcome the rest of our roundtable team. And it's always a pleasant surprise to see who comes up first. This is Debbie Stewart. She is our special guest that we're adding this month. And Debbie, let me ask you, where in the state are you? Where do you live?
I live in Westfield, Indiana, which is the north side of Indianapolis.
Yeah, I've actually been to Westfield. Nice place. Great sports complex you have there.
Yes. It's
wonderful. And what's your connection to Convention of States, Indiana? What have you been doing with us, for us?
Yeah, so several years ago, I heard about the Convention of States through a class I was teaching. And then I began to, I met with Dale and I began to do some teachings on the Monday night show once in a while on either civics or the Constitution.
In fact, I've seen you do some of those.
Okay.
And so you're an old hand at this, and welcome to your first roundtable, okay?
Thank you, John.
Okay, and we've got about 3 or 4 others who are going to join us. Dale's our state director. Good evening, Dale. Welcome back to the roundtable.
Thank you, John. Thank you very much.
Okay, who else we got coming
Bring
in
another
here?
one on here.
Rick is our events coordinator. Hi, Rick.
Hey, John, glad to be here tonight.
Yeah, welcome back.
Thanks.
And then we will have our Telepatriots administrator, Gary Harbaugh. Welcome back, Gary.
Thanks, John.
I
Good to
think
be
we've
here.
got one more. Ken, you've been here before, but now you're here to stay. Okay.
Long time no see.
Well, our big topic tonight is self-governance. And I want to throw out kind of a general question there for the roundtable here. And since Debbie's our special guest, she gets first crack at it. Debbie, the parent organization that created Convention of States is called Citizens for Self-Governance. So self-governance is right at the heart of COS. What exactly do we mean by self-governance?
Well, that's a great question. I would say that it's when a group of people, whether just a group or the local city or your state or your nation, gets together and they define, first of all, what is government going to be? Second of all, they are the ones that design what that government looks like and how it's going to run. And then thirdly, they elect the people to go ahead and actually run the government the way they designed it.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of an overall 20,000 foot level answer.
That's a good start. Any of the other 4 members of the state leadership team have anything you want to add to that? Gary?
I came across a quote today from Thomas Jefferson that I think is pretty apropos. And he said, if we are to guard against ignorance and remain free, it is the responsibility of every American to be informed. And really, self-governance has to begin with people being informed and then being willing to stand up and speak up about the issues of the day.
Mm-hmm. I remember saying that information is power. And by getting informed, by gaining information, we're empowering ourselves. Okay, Dale, do you have a comment?
Yeah, John, I think we're going to cover this a little bit more as we go along here, but I'm sure. But, I just think the founders believed in self-governance so strongly. And I think the founders of Convention of States saw that and recognized that and knew what was going on in our world today and recognized and knew that self-governance was the answer to so many of our problems and challenges in our country today. So I think it all stems from the original founding of our country.
Yeah, I think so. And, liberty is the cry. It's the watchword. People want to be free. They don't want to be under the thumb of an oppressor. And so it was right in the DNA of the founding of this country. And, we hear about the Boston Tea Party and the taxation without representation argument. It was that, but it was so much more than that, because King George and the British Parliament were so oppressive that the Patriots wanted to govern themselves. They didn't want some wealthy foreign ruler to tell them what to do. Okay, anyone else on the screen have a comment they want to make on what exactly do we mean? Yes, Rick.
I think for me, self-governance means, participating in the government. And, we all want to make choices for ourselves and live our lives the way we want to live it. But we have to temper that with, respect for other people and morality and that sort of thing. But you need to participate in government to protect our way of life, the way we think life should be lived. And we do that by participating. Some dictator or ruler determine, how we're going to live.
Yeah.
So it's kind of self-defense. Self-government to me is kind of like self-defense and protecting our own way of life and choose the way we choose to live within, certain bounds of civilization.
Yeah, and at the beginning of your comment, you said something about respecting the rights of others. And that's also at the heart of self-governance, because if I have the right to govern myself, you have the right to govern yourself too, and I've got to respect that. Ken, do we have a caller?
Yes, we do. We have Dale Tipton calling in from the north side of Indiana. Dale, are you there?
Let's hear.
I am. Can you hear me?
Yeah, hear you loud and clear, Dale. Go ahead.
I am. Can you hear me?
Go ahead, Dale. We can hear you.
I've just got a question. If in the world of the founders, self-governance was really important, but we've strayed so far from that today where government seems to want to provide everything. How do we turn that around?
That's a thoughtful question. How do we turn that around? Anybody have a thought on that? Debbie? Yeah.
Absolutely. We have, our mindset has totally changed. So we're not self-sustaining what the founders originally intended. And so that's such a great question, because until we go back and re-educate our population of people, our citizens, on what self-governance really is and what it takes, and that we all play a part in that, until we change that paradigm, it's going to be difficult to keep going. And we know our founding fathers were very clear when they said that this self-government that they came up with will not sustain itself without morality. And that's the other piece that we've really gone away from. And that is really the foundation.
Mm-hmm. I don't remember who said this, but one of the drafters of the Constitution was famous for saying this Constitution will only work in a country of moral people with a moral foundation. Yeah. Yep. Well, thanks, Dale, for calling in. That was a good question. I think we're going to move ahead to another question that I thought up and we came up with, and it says, why is self-governance so important? Let's see. I'm gonna call on Gary to give a whack at that one. Why is self-governance so important, Gary? What do you think?
John, this is a really good question, and I think it ties right back into the question that Dale presented when he called in. And we can have an unlimited government, which is in some ways what we have now. And part of the problem with creating an unlimited government is that it causes unlimited spending. And we know that unlimited spending is not sustainable. That's really one of the reasons why we have one of the pillars of our Article 5 movement to limit federal spending, because by putting limits on government then has to set priorities, and that's where it requires people to be informed, to understand, and to help in making those choices. Otherwise, you wind up with kind of where we are today, where you sort of have an unlimited government trying to be all things to all people, and we're on a path to destruction, and it's important that we get off that path.
Yeah, yes, indeed. Debbie, do you have anything to add to that? Why do you think self-government is so important?
Well, I think that whenever you give people a choice to take part in something, they own it a lot more. And so then they take much more care in it. And we do that with our kids and our students at school. We ask them, well, what would be some ideas that we would have to run this class or to spend our day today? And I think that with some guiding principles, most people will want to do those things that can impact them the best. But then they also know that, hey, I've got a stake in this thing. I'm part of the answer and the solution.
I like that. Okay, yeah, Rick.
Well, I'd just like to say that I think self-governance has the potential the real importance of self-governance is it has the potential to make the greatest amount of people happy, to put it way, I guess. Because when power is concentrated in a few people, they tend to do their own self-interest thing. But when it's the group that makes the choices and the group that decides how the group is going to live in society and civilization, then the greatest number of people can have their needs and wishes and wants met.
The greatest good for the greatest number of people.
There you go.
It sounds like something from as far back as Plato. I remember reading that in a philosophy book somewhere along the line. Dale, I saw your hand, but Ken, do you have a phone call?
Not a phone call, John, but we have a comment from a viewer who was responding to Gary's comment.
Oh, yeah?
Basically saying that the quote that he was referring to was John Adams.
Okay.
And that's who basically had made that quote. So I just wanted to throw
Thanks.
that in. He was adding to Gary's thing.
That's right. And that wording is there. This Constitution is wholly inadequate to govern any other people. Yeah. Thanks,
Thank you,
Ken. Okay, Dale, what did you want to say there?
I just wanted to also comment on this is that, I think self-governance is becoming so much more important, and it's being recognized by so many other groups and resources other than Convention of States. Of course, Convention of States, we've felt this self-governance was very important for a long, long time. But I'm beginning to notice others are beginning to understand this, and I think recognize this. The closer you can get to decisions being made locally, the better off we are. And I think I think it's becoming even more important because it's becoming more and more recognized by more groups and individuals. Just wanted to throw that in.
All right. Thank you. Well, let's move on to our next question then. What are some of the benefits of self-governance? Some of the benefits. And I want to give Debbie Stewart first crack at this one as our guest. Debbie, what do you say?
Well, I think one of the benefits of self-government is, again, the ownership that people would take in it, because when they design it, they take a lot of ownership in it, and they're going to take care. But also we have things like checks and balances that would be a great benefit of self-government, because we know that the founding fathers were very clear. They believed that man had a propensity to sin. They believed the Bible, and they knew that power and greed were very much in the forefront of many of our hearts. And so they took great care in making sure that checks and balances were built into that. So I just think that's one of the benefits of self-government.
Yeah, it sure is. And I don't think we can say enough about ownership. You know, when you own something, you take pride in it. You want to polish it and preserve it for the next generation. And a strange thought occurred to me as you were talking, Debbie, and it is that, none of us really likes to pay taxes. But when we pay taxes, if we have some ownership in what's going on, we will feel a lot better about those taxes we pay, because we have a stronger feeling that they're going toward a good cause, And I think back to some years ago, I had the opportunity to attend a symposium on the campus of the Air Force Academy out in Colorado Springs. And I was so impressed with the cadets. They're all dressed in their Air Force blue. And every building I went to, they opened the door and they said, "Good morning, sir." And I felt like royalty, just as a guest on their campus. But I told one of them after I was there a couple of days, I said, I appreciate this so much, and I feel a whole lot better as a taxpayer to see the kinds of officers who are going to be coming out of this Air Force Academy. My tax money is going to some good causes, So that, last Monday was tax day, and, we thought we were done thinking about it. So I'll just change the subject and get off of taxes now. Dale or Rick, anybody have another benefit or two of self-governance that occurs to you? Rick?
Well, I think one of the benefits of self-governance is that it can be kind of a form of an altruistic government, where the group, when the group's making decisions, they can, take other people's needs and wants, like I said earlier, into consideration, and care for those that are in tough times or difficult situations, or have physical needs that need to be dealt with, things like that. So I think it's a very altruistic and group-oriented form of government.
Yeah, and you know, the way our Constitution is written, we are a republic. We're not a democracy. And a lot of checks and balances built into the system to protect the rights of the minority. And that's why I like this so much better than just a pure democracy where majority rules. Then you have mob rule. Okay, Ken, what do you have for us?
Just another viewer who was chiming in on self-governance. This is somebody named Storm Chaser who was saying that self-governance is the basis for the code of ethics in various small groups, such as the military academies and community watch groups. So,
Excellent. Yes, that's true. It's the basis for the code of ethics in lots of our smaller groups.
thanks.
Thank you, Storm Chaser. Okay, well, let's move on to our next question. How can we preserve our founders' intent of self-governance? Because, you know, we've already alluded to the fact that we've drifted far afield from that. And, you know, you've got powerful federal bureaucracy, and you've got these unelected bureaucrats in Washington, D.C. who are making rules for us. So, Dale, do you have a thought on that?
Well, you know, there's this group called Convention of States.
Never heard of it. What is it?
And, you know, they're advocating that we conduct this thing called the Convention of States. And one of the main reasons is to propose amendments centered around curtailing the breadth and control of the federal government.
Yeah.
So, you know, I think that might be a real good starting point. I'd recommend you check into the national website, conventionofstates.com, and check that out.
I better do that. I never heard of that website. You know, and I think it was George Mason who just insisted that the second clause be added to the Article 5 that says, or a convention of states can propose amendments to the Constitution, because he knew, and the other founders came to believe, that Congress will never limit its own power, and they'll never propose an amendment to the states that limits their own power. It's going to have to be we the people through our states. And we've had some great success in the last 3 months here. We're up to what, 19 states have now passed the resolution calling
That's
for
right.
the convention.
Right.
19 and 15 to go. We're on the downhill side, and I sure hope to see a snowball effect start to come to pass. Yeah, Dale again.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, we were just on a call the other night with Mark Meckler, our CEO, our leader, and I questioned him on, are we going to, the goal kind of has always been so far this year that we get to 22 states, 22 and 22. And he was very confident in that we could reach that number.
Yeah.
He mentioned, well, I probably shouldn't say the states.
Probably not.
I probably shouldn't say those, but there are 3 more in line, very, very close to coming on, and very good, very high probability. So we could very easily, I guess, hit that 22 and 22. That would be great.
That's great to hear. You know, I've met Mark Meckler, and he is not a pie in the sky kind of guy.
Right.
And for him to say there's a real possibility of 3 more states. We were kind of on hold for a long time due to COVID, and state legislatures either weren't meeting or they were doing short sessions. And so we didn't get much progress in the last 2 years, but boy, they've been falling like dominoes now.
2019 was the last state prior to this year.
Wow. So 3 year, a 3-year hiatus. Yeah.
So we've added 4 states so far this year.
4 this year. Okay. I know that 3 fell in rapid succession there,
right,
just in the last month or so. Ken, what do you have?
Well, we seem to have a hot chat room tonight. We've got a number of comments. I thought before we move on to the next question, I'd post a few things of what's going on in the chat room.
Yeah.
We have We have some people. We have this Robin Bennington Nichols says we need to go back to voting a one-day process, no mail-in unless requested with a medical reason. We're serving in the forces. No, now some are getting voting forms now that have not been requested.
Mm-hmm.
It's expanded to the voting, as well as we have another comment from a Lori Rogers Triac. Probably not pronouncing that right, but she's talking about self-government ensures that we can choose our leaders and live as we see fit within our communities.
Great ideas.
And we've had one. Let's see, we had another one in here. Some interesting handles here. This is Siggity Liggity. She says we need term limits so bad. She says when you have never had a job and been in office for 45 years, how can you really know what's best for the people? Our leaders are out of touch with reality, and that's a
great point, Siggity. Great point. Yep. And of course, that's one of our three areas of possible amendments, imposing term limits on federal officers. Yes, Dale.
I just want to make a comment. I'm so pleased to see these new names come up on viewers.
Yeah.
That's a good sign. Welcome all of you. If this is your first experience or first visit to our roundtable, we do this every Monday night, by the way. It's not a roundtable every Monday night, but we do broadcast every Monday night. So hope to see you then as well. So I just wanted to
it's every Monday at 7:00 Eastern time.
That's right.
And the fourth Monday of the month, it's the roundtable.
Now we don't have Debbie Stewart on there every night.
Oh,
she would love to be on there every night, but I'm just kidding.
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, let's move on to one more question before we take a short break. And I want to ask, what are some current examples of why we need to emphasize self-governance in America today? And we already got some sort of answers to that, the irregularities in voting and so on. So, Debbie, I always like to pick on our guest first. Do you have another example or two of why we need to emphasize this thing in America?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the big one that most people are seeing is our freedom of speech, first of all. Mm-hmm. And another one that maybe people don't know as much about is the international law that's coming from the World Forum, and some of the world organizations are trying to implement their international laws in place of our domestic policies. And that is something that's kind of behind the veil that most people don't know what's going on, but it's very scary when you start looking at us giving up our sovereignty in that way.
Yeah. And there's no provision in the Constitution for any body that's superior to the Congress as far as writing laws goes. That's a huge issue. Rick, do you have an example of why we need to emphasize this?
Well, I'm not sure it's a specific example, but I think one of the things we need to communicate with people is to know their rights. You can't play football if you don't know the rules of the game, and government's the same way. It amazes me sometimes, and I'm one of those. It surprised me how little I knew about the Constitution when I thought I actually knew a lot about the Constitution, about the laws and our real rights to self-govern. Mm-hmm. So I think one of the things that I like about Convention of States is our educational aspect of educating people on their rights, their ability to participate in government, how they can talk to their school boards, and how they can participate in going and speaking before the legislature and talking with their representatives and to actually get some things done. So I think it's educating parents, first of all, and then getting parents to educate their children. And we need to bring education back into the school about civics and government classes. I took civics and government in high school. And, and then Convention of States is, that's one of our big things, is educating people on how they can actually participate in self-government.
Yep. Until I started getting active, which about 8 years ago, I started getting active first in Convention of States and in my local government here. I didn't know much of this. I did have a good civics education, but that was back in the 1960s, when I think most schools taught civics. I didn't like it. I hated it. This is boring, the typical teenage reaction. But I remember some of what they taught me, and I grieve the fact that so many schools are not teaching civics these days. But then the thing about meeting with your school board and your legislators, that's something that I've learned to do, and it's surprisingly easy. I used to think, these elected officials were some kind of supermen and superwomen, and then I come to find out they're just like me. They have a job. They live in my city, and they go to work every day, and then they go off and legislate at the proper time. But they're just common, ordinary people, and they're open. In fact, the ones I've talked to really want to hear from their constituents. They want to know, what do my people think? And so that's a pretty good way to get involved. Anyone else? Gary, do you have an answer to that question, an example of why we need to emphasize this?
John, one of the things that comes to my mind is that we have a couple political tribes in America, and when one tribe is in charge, people in that tribe tend to think that's good, but everybody else thinks it's not so good.
Yeah.
We really need everybody to understand that if we limit the power of government, then it doesn't matter so much which tribe is in charge. And the smaller the government is, the more we can really have self-governance, where it comes from the bottom up instead of the top down. And I think more people will be happy when we have a more limited government.
That's a great example. Government has grown too big and too powerful. Okay, well, it's about 7:30, and we're going to take a short break. I want to show you a message from one of our contributors. It's called the Free to Be Free Moment. We'll be right back.
Okay, and I just want to mention, everybody, if you're not automatically muted when I bring this up, mute yourself, and we'll be right back, okay?
Over the past week, I have twice been asked about the meaning of a license plate I have on the front of my truck. It's a Gadsden flag. You might recognize it with its yellow background, a coiled timber rattlesnake, and the motto, "Don't Tread on Me." It is named after Christopher Gadsden, its designer, who designed it in 1775 during the American War for Independence, and it was first adopted by the Continental Marines. Now, a snake has long been used as a symbol for the American spirit of its founding. Some say that it is a symbol of wisdom, relying on Matthew 10:16, where Jesus sends out his disciples and instructs them, "I am sending you out like sheep surrounded by wolves, so be wise as serpents and innocent as doves." The snake itself, if you think of its behavior, is an excellent symbol for the spirit of the American founding. The snake is not by its nature aggressive, but if you disturb it, it will first rattle and warn you that you're about to get into trouble. And if you ignore the warning and tread on the snake, you're going to get bit with some severe consequences. In 1775, Benjamin Franklin wrote an essay discussing the symbolism of the snake and its association with the spirit of the American founding. Let me read you some excerpts from that essay. There was painted a rattlesnake with this modest motto under it, "Don't tread on me." She has no eyelids. She may therefore be esteemed an emblem of vigilance. She never begins an attack, nor when once engaged ever surrenders. The rattlesnake is solitary and associates with her kind only when it is necessary for their preservation. 'Tis curious and amazing to observe how distinct and independent of each other the rattles of this animal are, and yet how firmly they are united together so as never to be separated but by breaking them to pieces. The power of fascination attributed to her by a generous construction may be understood to mean that those who consider the liberty and blessings which America affords and once come over to her never afterwards leave her, but spend their lives with her. So there you go. That's the reason, or the symbolism behind the flag that I have on the front of my truck. I believe that it is an excellent symbol for the spirit of the American founding.
Well, that was great. And thank you, Paul Phillips, for that contribution. Yeah. Want to welcome everybody back to the COS Indiana Roundtable. We're talking about self-governance this time. And our next question is, can you give any examples of why we need to restore, well, okay, that'll be the next question. What are some, Dale, you're throwing me curves here.
I'm sorry, John.
I'm striking out, man.
Didn't we do this?
No.
No, we didn't. I'm sorry.
Examples of why we need to restore self-governance right here in Indiana.
All
you know, and this might be a pretty easy question to answer. Debbie, you want to take the first swing at this one? What's wrong in Indiana that we need to restore self-governance? Oops, you're muted.
See, I remembered to mute, but I forgot to unmute.
Now you're with us.
Okay, so I don't know, I just saw a lot really was obvious to me when the whole COVID thing happened and the tyranny with the mask mandates and how that was just pushed, and it wasn't necessarily a legislative thing, but it was done by like an emergency executive order or things like that. That kind of went on and on and on.
Yeah.
And it was really obvious to me, we're not really even following how our government's supposed to run here. So if they're doing it in this spot that we're seeing, what are they doing in other areas that we haven't been looking at?
Good answer. Rick, you got an example of why we need to restore self-governance right here?
Well, I think, like Debbie said, I think the pandemic's the number one thing on my list with that sort of thing, but there's others. But I think when the pandemic came along, that wasn't anything that we as a people had much input on is what happened. The governor and a few elected officials made decisions that, ruined several people's lives, that destroyed businesses and, shut down churches when probably people needed church more than ever before.
Mm-hmm.
And so, we didn't have a lot of say in those decisions. And there's, that's why self-governance needs to be restored, because we need to have voice in those kind of things.
All right. Thank you. Ken, what do you have?
Got two comments that I think fit right in here with what we're talking about. John Graves, who we had posted a comment from before, mentioned this. He said, he asked, do you think the oppression we have experienced from our government over COVID has been a catalyst for Convention of States resurgence? I found that to be an interesting observation.
That's a question, and I think the answer is an unqualified yes. We have had a real surge in supporters, people signing our petition in Indiana, and I suppose all over the country. So that's a great question, and I think we have an unqualified yes to answer that one. What else you got for us?
I had one more comment, John, and this one is kind of interesting because it goes back to self-governance and goes a little deeper in self-governance. Storm Chaser brings up the failure to self-govern at the family level is the reason for the breakdown in family-based values and source of many community-based issues. I think he's hitting on a major problem we have in the country, and that is the destruction of our family units.
Mm-hmm. Very good insight there. Yeah,
those are two very good comments. Very good.
So that's an example. Self-governance right at the family level. Okay, Dale.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out that I'm sure everyone's aware. A lot of the problems that have come about nationally that you see on national news, it's happening here in Indiana. There are we have some election integrity issues right here in Indiana. We have of course, the CRT and the school boards, and boys and women's sports, boys and girls sports. Um, those are all issues that are also occurring right here in Indiana, and
Yeah.
I think this is where self-governance once again becomes more and more important.
Yep. And the legislature overwhelmingly passed this law to protect girls' sports. Governor vetoed it,
Right.
and the legislature's coming together. I think it's on May 24th. And the people want this. It polls at something like 70%. Now, I don't trust everything in the polls, but when it's that strong of a majority, it says something. And all of the representatives and senators that I've talked with plan to vote to overturn the governor's veto, and I look forward to that day. Dale?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and announce this, but we've gotten approval from National to officially oppose this or officially promote overriding the veto.
Okay, yeah, because that is a self-governance issue.
Yes.
Yeah, Ken.
Okay.
Ken, you have something for us?
Yes, we have another caller calling in. Susan is on the line. I think she has a question for the panel. Susan, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Go ahead with
Can
your
you hear me?
question.
Okay. I was wondering if election integrity is a problem. Is there anything in the Constitution that helps us find our way through that and fix it?
That's an excellent question, and nothing comes to mind in the Constitution to fix it, but I think it is an issue. Gary, do you have some comments on election integrity?
John, the Constitution really provides that states will conduct the elections.
Yeah, it does.
And you may be aware in Michigan, for example, there were a lot of irregularities, and there's a very strong challenge now to the person who is Secretary of State, and Secretary of States typically are in charge of elections. And so one of the things that we, the people, have to do is make our voice heard to our local election officials and our secretaries of state that we demand election integrity. And I think a lot of people are beginning to see that we need to really go back to paper ballots, because then you've got something you can count. And machines are not really trustworthy. And if people don't trust the machines and the process, then government begins to lose its legitimacy.
Yeah, and a lot of people just won't vote if they don't trust the system. Mm-hmm. And in my county, I live in Madison County, the limit of machines is that they have this machine that's a touch screen. And when I go in to vote, I tap the names I want to vote for, and then it prints a paper ballot. And I get to read it and make sure that it's accurate. And then that paper ballot goes in a counting machine, and the counter is not connected to the internet. And I think that's important. Mm-hmm. Not every county in Indiana has that kind of a system. But if the votes are counted on a machine that's connected to the internet, all kinds of things happen. And, the Department of Defense gets hacked. The White House Personnel Office got hacked a few years ago. And so voting machines can get hacked. I mean, these hackers are smart. So election integrity, big stuff. That was a great question, Susan. Thanks for calling it in. Yes, Ken.
As an add-on to that, John, I know it was brought up somewhere else in the chat area as well, but do you think there's any real chance at this point that we could actually go back to a single-day voting?
Well, I don't know. What do some of you think? Debbie, what do you think? Is there any chance we can do that?
Well, I think it's very wise because, whenever you want the most accurate result, you bring your window down, size, location, all that. You take out all the things that could mess that up. So I think it's very wise. And I feel like, and this is getting into probably your next question about keeping our elected officials in check. But I feel very strongly that this is a dividing line of those people who really want to see the right thing done in those, because anybody who does not stand for election integrity, I would ask the question, what are you doing in office then? What's your motivation? So I feel like single day, mail in only when you need it. You narrow the playing field down so that you make sure everybody can do that, right? But then the other things around that one day are the exceptions.
Yeah.
Not
Like
I think-
sickness
I
or
think-
you're overseas. Ken?
I'm sorry. I think what might help with that is if we made that a national holiday. I mean, give everybody the day off.
I've heard that mentioned a lot. We've got national holidays for everything else under the sun. And people
It's-
love
it's
to
one of
get
our most
paid not to
important-
go to work. So,
Yeah,
let's.
it's one of our most important days that we have to do our civic duty. So,
And I've thought even, the polls ought to be open 24 hours. You make it a full 24-hour day so that there's no excuse. Anyway, we'll see what happens. But in answer to the viewer's question, I personally don't know if there's much of a chance for that to happen because even, I said some good things about my county, but we've also gone to vote centers, which opened a week ago today for early voting. They're going to be open for 11 days before May 3rd. And there are 9 polling places around Madison County where people can vote, today, tomorrow, right up through Friday. And people like that convenience. And so once people have a right, if you want to call it a right, it's really hard to take it away because people like self-governance. And so it's a catch-22. It's a catch-22. But I think we're all agreed the importance of one day, National Election Day, especially, for president. Because there were some abnormalities in a lot of states last time around. And I don't think the whole truth has come out yet. But one of my favorite sayings is truth will out. Jeff says, exactly, a day off so the laborer can vote. Write the legislation and let's pass it.
Yeah.
Jeff, you sound like a good patriot. Thank you. Thanks for that comment. Let's move on to another. Oh, okay, before we move on, Rick, you got a comment?
Yeah, before we move on, I'd just like to comment on, I think it was Storm Chaser brought up the thing about the family. And, that's one of my soapbox issues is the strength of the family because, the family is the foundation of civilization. It's the family unit is what everything else is based on.
Yeah.
Or even self-government is, kind of an example of family. So, but, we've got schools that are teaching our children that, they don't have to get their parents' permission to get a vaccine. They don't have to get their parents' permission to get birth control.
Yeah.
And all the schools are perpetuating this thing that the parents are, you don't really need to listen to your parents. We will tell you what you need to think, do, and say.
Mm-hmm.
And we've got the infiltration of drugs that's so bad it's killing all of our young people.
Yeah.
I think I heard today that it was like 100,000 young people have died in the past year just from fentanyl.
Yeah, it's terrible.
And, so the family value, the family unit, the family value that he brought up, I don't want to say he or she, but Storm Chaser.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a very critical issue to everything else that we're talking about here.
All right, Ken.
yeah, I'm seeing more new names in the chat room, so I want to just throw up and anytime I see a new name, I want to put up the comment. And this is a Susie Schaff. Sorry if I mispronounced that, but she commented again on paper ballots and the voting machines. So just another new viewer that I haven't seen before. Thanks, Susie, for tuning in.
Yeah, that's a good comment. Yes, Dale.
I just want to tack on to what Ken was saying. I've been following the comment count over here. We've set a record tonight.
Oh.
Now I know some of these comments might. Well, anyway, it's a record. We've got 60 comments so far.
Unbelievable.
We have never had that many comments. So thank you all for joining in tonight on our broadcast. Thanks everyone.
That's great. 60. Okay. See if we get 100 in the next 10 minutes. Okay.
There you go. Go for 100.
I might log off and go log on there so I can make a comment.
All right.
Okay, we have another question, and Debbie alluded to it. What are some ways that we can keep our elected officials in check? You're one ahead of me, Dale.
I am again, aren't I?
What are some ways we can keep our elected officials in check? Debbie, you want to take a crack at that one?
Sure. I really feel like this starts with education, because I think a lot of people don't even know it's their job to do that. And that's one of the benefits of being in a self-government. And so I feel like going back to where it's taught in primary school, middle school, high school. You take a woodworking shop and you learn how to do woodwork and practice it, but let's practice our government and how things work. And let's go out there and be a part of some things. Let's educate people on all the different ways they can get involved, voting day and before, all the different things. And teaching people to research their candidates. We live in a world where people, if they say something, you believe it. But we know the best predictor of the future is what they've done in the past. And we need to teach people, you don't go by what people say, you go and research what they've done. And that's what they're going to do next week, what they did last week and last month and last year. And then let people vote.
And in many cases, whenever there's a roll call vote in the Indiana House or Senate, there's a record, public record, and you can get it by going to the state's website. I think it's in.gov, something like that. Somebody better look it up and tell the truth, but you can go to the state government website and see the voting record of these men and women and see how they really voted. So that's a good start. Gary, you got some ideas building on that, how to keep our elected officials in check?
John, it goes to that point of paying attention to what they're doing. One thing I can assure you is, even though you don't contact your legislator about an issue, there's probably a paid lobbyist in Indianapolis that has their ear. And if they don't hear from we the people, they're going to do what the lobbyist tells them to do, because why wouldn't they? And so hopefully they have some principles, but more importantly, we have to pay attention to what they're doing and hold their feet to the fire to vote the way we expect them to.
Excellent. And George Ward just put up the website. It's IGA, which stands for Indiana General Assembly, IGA@in.gov. And you can go there and, they live stream the sessions and the committee hearings. And there's a record of their vote when it's a roll call vote, not when it's a voice vote. But okay, Debbie?
Yeah, just to add to that, there's something called the iVoter Guide, and they're trying to do those for every state. So I would encourage people to go just Google iVoter Guide for Indiana, whatever state they're in, and see what they've come up with the research.
iVoter Guide, kind of like iPhone and iPad, but iVoter Guide. Okay. Now I do know, because I've had legislators tell me this, they pay attention to the number of emails and phone calls their office gets. And I mean, you can call in every day if you want to and say, I'm for this bill or I'm against that bill, because their legislative assistant just keeps tab of how many people called in or emailed in and said they're for it or against it. And these legislators want to know what their constituents feel. And if the phone calls and emails are running 10-1 in one direction, they'll pay attention to that, because they know they have to answer to you at the next general election. And you can unseat them, just like you hired them, you can fire them. And so that's a good way to keep them in check too. Flood their office with phone calls and emails. Yes, Dale.
Just very quickly, just want to throw this out that we are working on a project ourselves here in Indiana. It's called the Road to Activism. And this is going to, if this works out as we have it planned, this is going to give you information on how your legislator voted, even down to your school board member, your school board representative, and possibly city council, because this is needed information, and we are working on a project that I think is going to contribute to helping activists coming into convention of states to learn this type of information. So
That's great
stay tuned,
information.
everyone.
Glad to hear it. Well, yeah, Rick.
I'll just kind of tag on to what you were saying there, John. We had the surge day at the Capitol building, and we had a pretty good crowd there. We were all very happy with the crowd that showed up in support of what we're doing. But there was another group there. I won't mention their name, but what I'd call probably an opposition group that was there, and they brought several busloads of people in. So representative government, the person that you elect to be your representative, is going to represent the most opinions that he hears. Just like you say, what they hear the most is what they're going to hopefully represent. So, this thing is, we all talk about the silent majority, but that doesn't work anymore. If the opposition to what you're wanting done or what you support, if they're all out there yelling and screaming and they're the squeaky wheel, we can't sit back and be the silent majority anymore. We got to tell these people what we expect and hold them accountable to do it.
And some of these groups are well funded by certain interests that I will not name in a public setting, but I know they're very well funded. That's how they get buses to take them to the Capitol. And we don't have that kind of funding. And so it has to be we the people speaking up with one voice.
And that's the easy part, though. I mean, it's just an email or a phone call or a stop by their office type thing.
Yeah, it is easy. And, really the best time to meet with an elected official is when the legislature is not in session. So most of the year, the summer, the fall, the winter, when they're in session, they're busy. They're running crazy from one committee meeting to another, and then for the floor votes. And you'll do good to get 2 minutes with a legislator during the session. But when they're not in session, and this would hold true for city council, county commission, meet with them individually when they're not in session. Then they have time, and they do want to hear from constituents. I know that. They've told me so. Okay.
Tell us that they had, in the 30 days the legislature was in session, they had like 800 bills that they had to consider in 30 days or something.
Oh, it was closer to 1,000. Yeah.
So,
and fortunately, most of those never see the light of day because I keep losing the names, but one of the founders said that neither life nor property is safe whenever the legislature is in session. And so in my view, the fewer bills they pass, the better, because some of those bills are just intrusive, and that's what we're trying to stop. Yes, Ken.
Hey, before we go on, John, to the next question, I know you're getting ready to do that. I just wanted to bring up another comment. This doesn't necessarily pertain to this particular question, but I thought it was interesting. A gentleman named George Howard, as we've been talking about all month long, what can we do? How can we get involved? He brought up an interesting comment that I thought was worth bringing up at this point, as he's up in the Plymouth area, and mentioned that he'd like to see youth get involved, and talked about holding a COS awareness bash. That sounded kind of interesting to me. So
bash.
I thought I'd throw that up there, and maybe we can get some kind of a conservatism COS awareness bash and flood the gates with young people to get, because we're going to need those people in the voting ranks as well as they're coming up. So it's a good time to bring them up.
Great, George. Thank you. Dale, you have a response to that?
Yeah, George, please email us your address and contact information. We have an outstanding region captain that lives in Plymouth, Indiana, and I'm sure he would love to talk to you about your idea.
Wow.
So please email us that information.
Self-governance, activism, it's happening right here, live on the internet. That's great. Well, we're pushing up to 8 o'clock now, so what I want to do, Dale, is skip to the last question on resources and go around the roundtable quickly here. What are the best resources to restore self-governance? And as my habit is, I want to go to Debbie first, give you first shot at that.
Well, I would say, the best way to get things back the way they were originally intended is to go back till you found out we started to veer off course. And so I would say, let's go back to the Constitution, the Declaration, the Bill of Rights, those founding documents, and let's go back and revisit them and work them into everything, because we're going to become what you look at is what you become. And if we're not looking at our founding fathers' original intent and those documents, we're not going to get there.
Okay, very good. Ken?
Yeah, I'm going to use a cliche that's been thrown around our group of Convention of States for a long time, and that's basically use the Constitution to save the Constitution.
Mm-hmm. Use the Constitution to save the Constitution. And the particular meaning we have to that is Article 5, where the states can call for a convention to propose amendments. Dale, did I see your hand sneak up there a minute ago?
No, I was just giving thumbs up to what Debbie said.
All right.
Wait,
All
you
right.
were giving me a thumbs up?
Yes, I was. I always,
Yeah.
Wow. Are you
I
feeling
always-
okay, Dale?
I always do that, Debbie.
Dale's on a roll here.
Yeah.
Well, you know, to add to that, I just want to mention our website that Dale mentioned earlier in the hour, the conventionofstates.com, full of resources. There's more stuff there than you can shake a stick at. And viewer, if you're interested in getting involved, there are a ton of ideas there, conventionofstates.com. And we're going to be showing you that in a little bit. I want to thank the Roundtable for your input. It's been invigorating, and the hour went by pretty quickly. So we'll see you all next month, okay? For now, we're going to show you our viewers a short, cool video of some young people giving their answers to this question: is the federal government broken?
Our government is definitely broken.
The EPA is totally out of control.
I mean, VA is completely broken.
If a private business were to run things like the government, they would be out of business like that.
Our tax system is ridiculous.
And how are we supposed to pay for that and our student loans and find a place to live with no job? I mean, it's almost as if nobody really cares what happens to us anymore.
There are so many problems that we have, and that's just going to be placed on us.
My generation especially, we need to lead, because enough is enough. DC needs to listen, and we need to take the power back to the people.
And so I invite you to join Convention of States right now by visiting conventionofstates.com. That's our website, and you're looking at it right there, conventionofstates.com. There you can join Convention of States by signing the petition. Fill in your first and last name and your email and your mobile phone and street address and so on. And if you really want to help make a difference, click that Take Action tab on the top there. And when you do, you'll see this, and there's a button there that says Become a Leader. And there you can apply for a leadership position. You see all of them that we have there. And we hope that you'll at least sign the petition. And if you really want to get involved, go to Take Action, Become a Leader. Now is the time to visit conventionofstates.com, click Take Action, and help us make history. Well, that brings us to the end of this month's Roundtable. Before I say goodbye, I want to remind you of our email address. If you have any questions about Convention of States, you can email them to us at that address that I gave you at the beginning of the hour, raiseyourvoice.cos@gmail.com. And the viewer who wants to do a bash in Plymouth, that's the email address for you to use. We monitor that. raiseyourvoice.cos@gmail.com. I want to encourage you to do that. I also want to remind you to tune in every Monday at 7 p.m. Eastern for the weekly broadcast of COS Indiana Live. We have this cool Slido polling. I like it. I think you'll like it too. So the next one is next week, May the 2nd. Okay. So mark your calendar, because you don't want to miss our next Roundtable. That'll be the fourth Monday of May the 23rd at 7 p.m. Eastern. Hope to see you then. I'm John Ackerman for COS Indiana Roundtable. Good night.